Chapter 14. Mason, up on the ridge, finds himself wondering about Dixon, whether he has arrived safely at the Cape. What, if he be there, he may be doing at a particular moment, given the time of day or night, and weather unknown. Our daily lives to distant stars attuned, he writes in a letter to Dixon he then decides not to send. Just a moment, Pitt says. You saw this document? Inquires Pliny. Good lads, cries Uncle Ives, blessing each with a pistol. No, don't thank me. The only condition is that you spend it wisely. Prudently invested, it could provide you a tidy fund by the time you're established enough as attorneys to need a friendly judge now and then. Be better, of course, if you were partners. Confuse people. Our idea, actually, says Pitt, is for one of us to run away and pretend to lead a wastrel's life whilst the other applies himself diligently to the law, making it even less possible to tell you apart, declares their Aunt Euphie. Mason can calculate roughly when Dixon may be at the Snout watching Jupiter and its harem of moons, and when up in the Malay Quarter inspecting some harem of his own. He imagines Dixon learning to cook a curry with orange leaves, reinventing the fricadelle, putting that god-awful ketchup in everything. Believing he has walked away from the Cape and successfully not looked back to see what Plutonian wife in what thin garment may after all have followed. Though none of them is anyone's Eurydice, he knows well enough who that is, or would be, were he Orpheus enough to carry a tune in a bucket. Mason continues to wonder how Dixon has brought himself to turn and then, to appearance imperturbable as a clam, to go back in, back to Jet, Greet, Els, Ostra, Johanna, the unsunned skins, the ovine aromas, the traffic to and from the medicine cabinet at all hours, the whispering in the corners, the never-ending intrigues, whilst coiled behind all gazes the great worm of slavery. No hour of the chapter ring is exempt from the echoes of heated voices off unadorned walls. The girls, having raided their father's snuff supply, dashing about, colliding and dreamy, and talking to no effect. By the time Dixon arrives, a number of stories have long been circulating. The town pretends to be shocked. Church services, far from the ordeals Johanna has expected, turn lively at last, with smirks and stares and eye avoidance, in full knowledge that everyone knows everyone else's secrets. She feels she's being admitted at last to the adult life of the Cape, though nothing, understand, for all the racing up and down stairs and hanging out windows has really happened, as these matters are reckoned, so that she feels like an impostor too, which is not without its own thrill of shame before the faces of the congregation, where within the brass band mercilessness of Sunday, these multiple acts of sisterhood will continue till after a while the focus shifts to some new Bathsheba. Cornelius, for his part, is not having quite so easy a time of it. Suddenly, wherever he goes, Dixon finds this unstable butterbox up the wrong end of some elephant gun, swivelling ever in Dixon's direction, as if the Dutchman has decided to accept him as a fair substitute for Mason. Through the streets, in the great southeast wind, the wig-snatching, flame-fanning, judgment-warping wind, they chase. Cornelius presently setting the forked support in the blowing dirt, with some smouldering naval slow match he carries in his teeth, igniting a giant full Dutch-ounce blast, whose ball ricochets off the roof tiles, sending small slides of red fragments into the street a good 10 feet wide and short. Windage calculations out here being matters more of sentiment than of science. 10 feet wide and short. He pauses to reload, his hair tie loosed and then blown away downwind, whilst Dixon lopes on, unwilling to believe that the Dutchman can still feel unrequited enough to want to go through this exercise again, until the great crack echoing from the hillside as the horneting sphere this time explodes a watermelon at a nearby market stand, and the greengrocers head for cover. As the Dutchman, unhurried, stolid, probably insane, is reloading for yet another onslaught, this time musketoon style, with a great pink fistful of bullets, Dixon, having had enough, turns and makes a run at him. There seems to be time. As he gets near, he sees white all around Vroom's irises, and though it may not matter in a short while, knows that the Dutchman has never faced a charging animal in his life. Until now, it seems, for he stands paralysed, powder horn slipping from his grasp, screaming, "No, I am supposed to do this!" Dixon takes the weapon gently away. My life for that ass Mason's? Excuse me, the mails. I've not been getting my Gazette. Was there some amendment to the Code of Honour that no one told me of? This is not about honour, it is about blood. Aye. And were you a Malay lad, I shouldn't be surprised. But as you're a Dutch lad, well, this running amok business, not that much in your people's line, is it? There's a good fellow. Coaxing him along before the wind. Same as we don't see that many Malays, do we really? Standing about in wooden shoes, eh? Fingers stopping up holes in the dike sort of thing. No, we don't. Just around this corner, good. A little soup key ought to be just the article. Soup key? The Dutchman in a stricken monotone nodding. Through this door, mynheer. There he is. Abdul, you son of a sea camel. We need a crock of your special reserve gin, with the usual herbs in it. Have the Notch girls come in yet? Well, we'll just be over here, in the corner. Ice! Quite so, Cornelius. I may call you that, mayn't I? Ice Abdul, by all means, and perhaps 2 pipes as well. He waves Cornelius into the tavern. My local, the world's end. They retreat to a dark corner. And for the next several hours, in a fragrant nebulosity that provides comfort when Dixon cannot, go assorting in some detail through the room's domestic sadness. Dixon is astonished at its depth, though it all becomes difficult to follow after a while. The fire roars. Above it, the haunch of some animal unfamiliar to Englishmen is slowly turned and basted. A Filipino guitar player strums a careless suite of nautical melodies, at the end of each of which he grins. "Not done yet, more to come, see?" Tallow candles gutter and go out as others are relit elsewhere in the room. The wind hoots up and down the alleyways. Table Bay slowly but measurably is blown seaward. The town being borne away from the shoreline at the same rate, and as the evening falls, in from this peculiar weather, hair and costumes blown and tangled, wearing cast-offs from the days of the sumptuary laws, which the slaves who got them either sold again promptly or could not bring themselves to wear, in tickling bergs and paduasoy, swanskin and shalloon, Brabant lace and ostrich feather hats, here enter a parade of curiously turned out young creatures, most of whom appear to know Dixon. Each to go sit at a table full of sailors, take a pipe or a drink, and eventually leave with a nautical prize in tow. The Filipino strums passionate minor key declarations of longing. The smoke in the room, though chiefly from tobacco, includes as well that of opium, hemp, and cloves, so that anyone who walks in must become intoxicated merely by standing and breathing. Dixon came ashore, intending to clear Mason's name of all suspicion before Cornelius, if not before the town, but somehow no opening for this has occurred. "Here's what we'll do," proposes Cornelius now, gravely giddy. "We will go to the company lodge, where the women are of all races, sizes, and specialities. We'll use my membership to get in, and you, that is the Royal Society, will then pay for everything." "I am happy to see you thus returned to what the Dutch must reckon sanity," replies Dixon, for whom the scene before them has begun to break up into small swarming bits of colour. "And of course I'd be nothing but delighted. The company seraglio smells of sandalwood and burning musk. There is difficulty at the door regarding some unpaid dues. The barometer in the ebony case upon the wall cannot be read, the lettering too intricate, the numerals possibly in some system other than the Arabic. There is no column of mercury, no moving pointer, yet pressure may be read by the adept, remaining invisible until sought for. The instrument hangs above a velvet meridian from France, near a painting of mounted settler at dusk, somewhere out in Hottentot land, with his old smooth bore athwart the saddle, the mountains between here and home all greys, except for the sunset catching their peaks a strange, thin, luminous red. And there, in the shadows, all but painted over. Once again, Dixon's unsuspicious heart is surprised. The first person to enter the room is Ostra, in a black velvet gown and a leather collar, being leash-led by a tiny, expressionless Malay sylph. It is evident from the leer on Cornelius's phiz that the tableau has been arranged for Dixon. There is enough time for her to recognize him, and know that he will not help her either, before she passes into another room, not looking back, to continue this slavery within slavery. At the moment of her vanishing, he pays her full notice for the first time, though who could have avoided some overspill from Mason's obsession? Even with Mason seldom able to bore Dixon upon the topic, Dixon most usually being out satisfying his more general desire for anything, and on lucky days everything, the world might be presenting to him moment by moment. Had he not been under siege, rather, by imps of appetite indiscriminate, might he and Mason have become rivals for her attention? Thus stands he gawping after her. "Let no one say that we cannot have fun when we must," Cornelius declares, thumping Dixon upon the shoulder. "It is our garden of amusement here." Something a bit too church-like for Dixon, however, a devotion to ritual and timing, the space underlit, what light there is as white as wig powder, flowing from pure white candles, burning smoothly in the still air, and from bowls of incense close by, white smoke in the same unwavering ascent. Now in high humour, Cornelius shows him secret pornoscopes, concealed by fanciful room decorations, where burghers may recline, grunting expressively, and spy upon one another in activities that may be elephantine, bird-like, over in a flash, long as church, enclosed in hopeless desire for, revenge on, escape from some woman somewhere among these befabled and dolorous company lanes. Someone said, some woman. The opium girls are kept in a room of their own. That the substance is smoked in a pipe has put it immediately in favour among the Dutch gentlemen. Taken with tobacco, producing a vertiginous swoon such as might require most of an evening of drinking spirits to obtain, it seems to promise a great savings in time and cash, a thought these thrifty tradesmen find enchanting. Before this surrender to sloth, however, lust is scheduled, splashing outside the church-drawn boundaries of marriage as across racial lines. Slave women are brought here from everywhere in this hemisphere to serve as dreamy, pliant shadows, baths of flesh darker than Dutch, the dangerously beautiful extrusion of everything these white brothers, seeking communion, cannot afford to contain, whilst their wives, if adverted to at all, are imagined at home sighing over needlework or the Bible. The gunfire is at 9. In practice, this curfew is stretched for as much as an hour, but by 10 the sailors, so cheery, young and careless with money, have to be out. After they are gone passes a silent period, an enshadowment which, prolonged past a certain point upon the clock face, begins to rouse apprehension among the fillies, for they know their night has begun, and who is coming for them now, and some of what will be done to them. Many who have been to rooms forbidden the others report seeing inside these a door to at least one room further, which may not be opened. The penetralia of the lodge are thus, even to those employed there, a region without a map. Anything may be there. Perhaps miracles are still possible. Both evil miracles, such as occur when excess of ill treatment are transformed to joy, quite common in this era, and the reverse, when excesses of well-being at length bring an anguish no less painful for it being metaphysical, good miracles. even in a polity, sunny, bustling and ordered as Cape Town, for reasons that mystify all. Some blame the southeast winds, pointing to now legendary examples of insane behaviour in the dry season, whilst others whisper of magical practices of the natives or Malays. Howbeit, now and then, madness will visit by surprise, taking away to its realm of voices and pain even a mind in the rosiest fullness of sanity. When they are too dangerous to roam free, the town madmen are kept as responsibility of the company, confined in padded rooms in the slave lodge. Sometimes, for their amusement, the heron will escort a particularly disobedient employee to a madman's cell, push her inside, and lock the door. Next to each cell is a viewing room, where the gentleman may then observe, through a wall of glass disguised as a great mirror, the often quite unviewable rencontre. The madmen are of every race, condition, and degree of affliction, from the amiably delusionary to the remorselessly homicidal. Some of them hate women, some desire them. Some know hate and desire as but minor aspects of a greater oceanic impulse, in which, report those who survive, it is unquestionably better not to be included. Some, again, do not survive. When the heron cannot return their remains to the villages, they dispose of them by sea, that the jackals may not have them. What, so far, there have been only rumours of, is a room 9 by 7 feet and 5 inches, being, with Dutch parsimony, reduced to a quarter-size replica of the cell at Fort William, Calcutta, in which 146 Europeans were obliged to spend the night of 20 to 21 June 1756. There persists along the company nerve lines a terrible simple nearness to the night of the black hole, some 0 point of history, reckoning whence all the marvels to follow. Quebec, Dr. Halley's comet, the battle of Quiberon Bay, aye, and the transit of Venus too, would elapse as fugitive as opium dreams, and mattering less. To find the black hole in a menu of erotic scenarios surprises no one at this particular end of the world. Residents, visitors, even a few seamen of elevated sensibility have returned, whenever possible, to be urged along by graceful lodge nymphs in indigo dhotis and turbans, dainty scimitars aflash, commanding their naked captives to squeeze together more and more tightly into the scale model cell, with as many slaves impersonating Europeans as will make up the complement, calculated at 36, best able to afford visitors an authentic sense of the black hole of Calcutta experience. If one did not wish to suffer horror directly, comments the Reverend in his daybook, one might either transcend it spiritually or eroticize it carnally. The sex entrepreneurs, reasoning that the combination of equatorial heat, sweat, and the flesh of strangers in enforced intimacy might be pleasurable, that therefore might some dramatized approach to death under such circumstances be pleasurable as well, with all squirming together in a serpent's nest of limbs and apertures and penises, immobilized in a bondage of similarly bound bodies, lubricated with a gleaming mixture of their own shared sweat, piss, and feces, nothing to breathe but one another's exhausted breaths, moving toward some single, slow, warm explosion. Though he does not read any of this aloud, choosing rather to skim ahead to the moral. Behind our public reaction to the event, the outrage and piety, what else may abide? What untouchable residue? Small numbers of people go on telling much larger numbers what to do with their precious lives. Among these multitudes, all but a few go on allowing them to do so. The British in India encourage the teeming populations they rule to teem as much as they like, whilst taking their land for themselves, and then restricting the parts of it the people will be permitted to teem upon. Yet hear the cry, O Lord, when even a small metaphor of this continental coercion is practiced in reverse, as 'twas in the old B.H. of C. Metaphor, you cry, sir, 120 lives were lost. I reply, British lives. What think you the overnight harvest of death is in Calcutta alone? In Indian lives, not only upon the one night, but every night, in streets that few could even tell you how to get to, street upon desperate street, till the smoke of the pyres takes it all into the invisible, yet invisible doth it go on, all of which greatly suiteth the company, and to whatever share it has negotiated, His Majesty's government as well. Cornelius has vanished into the room of beasts, a peculiarly Afrikaner taste. He pauses to advise Dixon. You might not enjoy it. A slender, dark arm full of bangles emerges from the doorway, and a practiced hat removes his hand. Let's go, Simba. Dixon has some idea of roaming the lodge, finding a secret tunnel to the castle, searching for Ostra, though what he will do then is less clear to him. He gets no further than a small on-premises tap room, where, paused for what they are pleased down in these parts to term ale, he encounters whom? But Police Agent Bonk, wearing a dressing gown of red velvet gallooned with gold, sweating copiously and trying to get drunk on Cape Madeira. You are back. When did you arrive? Your shop didn't know about it. I am done with that. I am a farmer now. This is my last night in Cape Town, though I might have remained here as a free burgher. Tomorrow I put my family in an ox wagon and start north, perhaps over the mountains, out of the reach of the company, who desire total control over every moment of every life here. I could not for them longer work. The mountains beckoned, the vast Hottentot land beyond, and at last, do you know, a curious thing happened. The more the company exerted itself, searches in the middle of the night, property impounded, the more farmers up country felt pressed to move north, away from the castle. They styled it trekking, and themselves trekkers. The demands of my job, the amount of surveillance alone they wished, were overwhelming. The supervisors each week coming up with newer and less realistic quotas. No time for anything. Out there are green rolling leagues of farmland and range. Bushmen, for the most part docile, I am assured. wild game everywhere, and best of all, no more company orders to obey. 'Tis a brave venture, much success. I'm confident about most of it. The one thing causing me some apprehension. Do you mind if that is, you're not in the middle of anything everyone else's fun, it seems. I can fire a rifle when I'm standing still, you see. It is the shooting and loading whilst on horseback that worries me. I don't know how to do it. And 'tis said there's no use going out there if you don't. Now, I was leaning toward an Ortman. Then I heard, no, they're too heavy, too much powder to carry. You're better off with a Bobbajan bund. You put the butt on the ground and muzzle load from the saddle. And if you're pressed for time, why, simply hit the ground with the butt, and the powder comes out this oversized priming hole and into the pan. And then I thought, well, suppose I got the Ortman anyway, then enlarged the hole myself. Dixon returns to the Vroom residence at dawn, all but carrying an equally, though perhaps not likewise, exhausted Cornelius. Everyone is up. The daughters run about, regarding Dixon out of the corners of their eyes. What enchanted Mason about these girls, Dixon comes to realize, was with some consternation, is their readiness to seek the shadow, avoid the light, believe in what haunts these shores exactly to the atom, ghosts everywhere, slaves, Hottentots driven into exile, animals remorselessly savage, a reservoir of sin whose weight, like that of the atmosphere, is borne day after day unnoticed, adverted to only when some vacuum is encountered. A stranger in town, a Malay publicly distraught, an hour at the lodge, into which its contents might rush with a turbulence felt and wondered at by all. The Vroom girls and their counterparts all over town are daughters of the end of the world, smiling more than they ought, chirping when needful, alert to each instant of the long day, as likely as the next to hold a chance of ruin. In their dreams they ever return to prisons of stone, to gates with seals 'tis death to break, the odour of soap and slops, the stillness of certain corridors, the unchallengeable love of a tyrant. Yellow light from unseen watchfires flickering upon the wall, and unexpectedly, rounding a particular corner, to the tall clock from home, ringing the quarter hour. One by one, the girls have grown up believing the Vroom clock, a long case heirloom brought from Holland, to be a living creature, conscious of itself and of them too, with its hooded face, its heartbeat, the bearing of a solemn messenger. It stands deep in the house, in a passageway between the front and the back, the two worlds, witness to everything that transpires within hearing range, with but its 1 hour hand and 2 bells, a great and a small, for striking the hours and quarter hours. They call it Boet, the traditional name here for an elder brother. When Mason and Dixon arrived with the Alicot clock, the girls assumed it was a travelling companion of the Englishman. Later, when Dixon returned with a different clock, Mr. Shelton's, no one noticed but Greet. Please go carefully. She takes him aside to whisper. They think Charles and you have something to do with the longitude. After you were gone, They came to believe that the Royal Society's clock, which you had with you, was able to keep errorless time at sea, a British state secret. We are apt to believe anything here. The East India Company is about to present 2 fabulous clocks of gold encrusted with diamonds, with tiny clockwork birds and such, to the Emperor of China. 'Twould be far wiser of you to hide this new clock and pretend that you are back for some other reason. The transit's run, lass. All that remains is to find the going of the clock, and why, great, the very idea. They all know I'm in here with you. She seizes the 2 sides of her bodice and tears it apart. A young bosom appears, pale and pink. Did you just do that? Shall I call out that you did? Or was it a spontaneous seam separation, apt to happen to any bodice, really? Thou did it, lass. They won't believe that. So they may say, but they know thee. Brutal Albion, you are making it difficult for me to love you. She presses together a few hidden snaps, and the bodice is once again complete. Mr. Mason was never so cold. Mason is naturally affectionate, though he appears not to know one end of a woman from another, yet 'tis all he thinks about, when he has a moment to think. Would thou denounce me to the company castle, then? Go carefully. Down in the castle, however, they are facing a dilemma. There is an unpremeditated wave of enthusiasm for 2-handed clocks currently sweeping over the Dutch, both here and back in Holland. Soon, during an interrogation, someone will wish to note the precise time that each question is asked or action taken by a clock with 2 hands. Not because anyone will ever review it, perhaps to intimidate the subject with the most advanced mechanical device of its time, certainly because minute-scaled accuracy is possible by now, and there is room for minutes to be entered in the records. Any new clock in their neighbourhood is thus eligible for the honour. Word has finally reached them, however, of Dixon's connection with Christopher Lemaire. They assume without reflection that the Jesuit must belong to some branch of the Dutch Lemaires, famed among whom were Jacob, navigator and explorer of the southern seas, and Isaac, the East India Company director and speculator, notorious for having introduced to the Dutch Stock Exchange the practice of trading in shares one did not actually own. And the priest is currently teaching in Flanders, is he not? Accordingly, Dixon's dossier is flagged in yellow, which means caution, may be connected dangerously, allowing him to go on as ever at the Cape, running before any wind of sensory delight, as the church faithful carouse, slaves conspire their freedom, and functionaries flee the castle and head for open country. End of chapter.